The Vikings should absolutely extend Jordan Addison, and here's how I think that could go.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to hone in a more accurate take about what I think will happen with Jordan Addison. There is, I guess, a little bit of like tepid interest in an extension right now. To be perfectly honest with you, this is probably something that goes down next offseason, not this one. He's got his 5th-year option picked up. They got 2 years left of team control. There's no rush to get this done. They can get it done next summer and everything will be fine. And it's a more common way to go about it. But between that and then a Brian O'Neill extension, which might be a lot closer, we'll see if that news comes out over the course of camp or maybe even before it. But between those two things, those are going to be the two big extension narratives that we have going on up until training camp takes over everything and how that's going in position battles and all that stuff. So here's what I think, what I've been saying most of the time, what I've been hearing most people say most of the time is, hey, Jordan Addison he's one of those high-end wide receiver 2s that would be a wide receiver 1 in a lot of places. That's probably an uncontroversial way to talk about Jordan Addison. By the way, I'm not going to get into the off-field stuff, any of that. I mean, the possibility of a problem is probably part of why you're going to wait till next year, see if he gets through this year without any other trouble. And if so, you got to deal with that and decide if that changes your value or anything like that. But it depends, right? If he jaywalks, you're probably not going to change it. If he, gets another DUI, you're probably going to make different decisions. But I'm not going to get into any of that in any detail today. So if that's what you're thinking, no, don't extend him, he's in trouble too much or whatever, I'm not going to engage with that. Let's set that aside. Let's pretend that doesn't exist. And let's just talk about the football player and set that baseline. And if you want to reduce it a little bit at the end because you don't trust him to stay on the field, okay. Instead, I want to reckon with, so I've probably been overrating this because like the extension that I think Addison should get, because I didn't realize what kind of numbers I was saying. But the Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith thing, that's what I've been saying a lot. Like, hey, those guys are also high-end wide receiver 2s that would be wide receiver 1s in a lot of places. Okay, there you go. And the only reason they're wide receiver 2s is because of who else is there. And with Devonta Smith, that's not even true anymore. He's wide receiver 1 now there because A.J. Brown got traded away. And, of course, things have gotten a lot different. But when those guys signed their contracts, that was the understanding of them. Okay, Miami has got Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle's the next guy. Here's what we pay him. Philadelphia's got A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith is the next guy. He's really, really good. He's a very important part of the offense, but A.J. Brown's the main guy. Here's what we pay him. And I kind of felt like there was a similar situation in Minnesota, right? Justin Jefferson's the main guy. Jordan Addison is still very important. Here's what they pay him. Couple of things. Those guys are making pretty big contracts that rival wide receiver 1 contracts. And those guys outproduced Jordan Addison by quite a bit over the 3 years, not just recently, over the 3 years between them getting drafted and them getting that extension. And what's interesting is both of those guys were so explosive and so good that their teams wanted to extend basically the minute they became eligible. Like Jordan Addison just became eligible for an extension at the end of this last draft, I think is the way it works, or is it maybe June 1st? But this year, he just became eligible for an extension at all. So those teams did it right away because they wanted to keep that cost reasonable and all that stuff. But they are much more productive as players than Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison has not produced on that level, either by efficiency or by volume. Because, of course, Addison's had a couple injuries in the suspension last year and stuff, so volume's going to be a little skewed. But even by efficiency, it wasn't the same. I'm going to go over that in a little more detail in a little bit here. But thinking about like the offenses that those guys have been a part of, they are vital parts of that offense anyways. And I would say so is Jordan Addison. So even though those offenses have been more successful with their duos than the Vikings have been with their duo of Jefferson and Addison, if you just compare like the Dolphins offseason between 2021, 22, and 23, which were the first 3 Jalen Waddle years, and then the same thing with, I think it's the same years, right? They were in the same class with Philadelphia and Devonta Smith with 21, 22, 23, or the 3 years before they signed their contract extensions. If you look at those offenses, I mean, that's the 2022 Dolphins crazy explosion. There's a Super Bowl appearance for the Eagles in there. those are big, really successful offenses. If you look at the last 3 years of the Vikings, you're kind of 1-2. You've gone 1 for 3 with successful offenses. And I don't think anybody believes that that's actually Jordan Addison's fault, right? 2023, you had Kirk Cousins get injured. You had all this QB chaos. 25, an even more chaotic QB position. I think most people are going to blame that more than they're going to blame Addison and Jefferson, like not necessarily being as good of a duo as we think. But regardless, that's going to be more difficult for Jordan Addison's agent to negotiate with, right? He can't point to this gaudy production and say, look, I was a part of that, because that gaudy production doesn't exist. All he can do is try to explain away his guy's role in the failure. That's a much weaker point. And so again, that's another reason why this probably doesn't happen this year. This is a great reason to wait a year for Addison to try to have a 1,000-yard season, try to have some better production he can point to. So I don't even know if either of these sides want to come to the table this year. Might behoove both of them to wait a little bit more. So I don't believe that that's going to happen, but that would be a fairly lame thing to do, to raise all these questions and then have my answer to them be, oh, well, we'll figure it out next year, right? So we're going to go into what if they want to get this done right now? What would it look like? What should it look like? And from that, I have to kind of divorce myself from the Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith conversation and instead ask the other side of it. If Jordan Addison doesn't compare to the high-end wide receiver two, or I'll put T. Higgins in that as well, who got a deal that, if I recall, is going to be a lot bigger than we might be looking at here when it comes to Jordan Addison. Those deals are probably going to eclipse what we would see from Jordan Addison until once you adjust for cap, right? Because cap go up, this is going to be 2 years later. It's going to be a bigger deal that actually looks a little closer, but we're going to adjust for all of that. And I also want to make sure we are properly valuing Jordan Addison as a player on the field. Again, I'm not worried about any of the outfield stuff, but as a player on the field, I look at those Miami offenses, or let's bring up the Bengals too. That's another big duo, big offense going crazy, right? And those Philadelphia offenses. And not only did they all outproduce the Vikings by quite a bit over the 3 years leading up to the contract extension, but those teams rely on those guys so much to do that. That duo is what works about this. If you go back to those years in Miami, it worked because they had two very fast guys and everybody was stressed very spatially. Everybody had to worry about so much deep stuff, and they had to give so much space to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. Those guys could break 10-yard routes and be wide open. They could still attack with that speed and get explosives going on, right? Stuff after the catch. Miami could do all sorts of things. Philadelphia had all kinds of stuff they could do. They could take advantage of it in the run game with Saquon Barkley. And then Cincinnati could also do that with Joe Burrow dishing it out underneath to, your kind of monster of the week role player guys that will flitter in and out of Cincinnati over the last 5 years. And Chase and Higgins sort of had their role in all of that too. So everybody had their thing to take advantage of it. I don't know if the Vikings have found that, right? Hasn't been Hawkinson the way we want, hasn't been the run game or anything like that. And they haven't had the quarterback that can dish like this, right? It's been force it to Justin Jefferson and give him 150 targets, or not have a very good offense. Those have been the two things that have happened with Jefferson and Addison. So with that in mind, the value we have and the thing we're trying to protect, what does this deal end up looking like? That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every match has felt like it has the potential for a memorable moment. We've had plenty of memorable moments over the last couple weeks. One goal can totally change the energy of a game, shift momentum, and alter the outcome in an instant. That's what makes tournament soccer so exciting, from the opening whistle to the final kick. Now, FanDuel is giving fans another reason to stay locked into every match with every goal pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals mean more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn on your token. So if you want to bet on the USA, minus 122 against Belgium tonight. That line has changed in the last couple days. I wonder if something happened. But if you want to bet on that, or if you want to just bet Argentina to beat Egypt, they're a minus 800 favorite or whatever, but every goal scored in that matchup, every time you get a Messi goal, you would get bonus bets. Figure it out, whatever you want to do, and you can find it at FanDuel. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you like what I'm doing here, if you want to support me more directly, you can find patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. I've reorganized everything on the Patreon, all 300 videos, by the way, over the years, into categories that you can now purchase separately, or you can get the whole monthly subscription, which is by far going to be the best deal anyways, but do what you want to do. Anyways, let's move on. So I've compiled some stats about what Jordan Addison kind of compares to when it comes to wide receiver 2 production. Right now, I'm going to go with yards per route run. It's my favorite wide receiver stat. It has been for a long time. It's the one that's got the most stability by a long shot. There's still, I mean, you still have to kind of take some context, right? Who was their quarterback? Were they injured that year or whatever? It's not going to be perfect to adjust for any of that to give you a full picture, but we can at least get some kind of ballpark for the sort of production we're dealing with here. So Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith in the 3 years leading up to their contract extension, not just 23, 24, 25, but in the years leading up to them getting paid, Waddle and Smith both hovered around 2 yards per route run, which is phenomenal. That's superstar production. If you get 2 yards per route run, you are killing it. Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and those kind of guys live above 2 yards per route run. Anything above 1.5 and you are a very valuable part of an offense. Anything below 1.5, then you're maybe like a role player. You're like a KJ Osborne or something like that. And if you're below 1, then you're doing a bad job, right? So that's where we're at. So Jalen Waddle goes from his rookie year, 1.75 yards per route run. Phenomenal rookie year. You're thrilled with that for a rookie year. And then he explodes in the next 2 years, right? This is the 22-23 Dolphins crazy offense period where he's up around 2.5. That's elite production. And so that next to Jalen Waddle and you go, okay, or next to Tyreek Hill and you go, okay, these guys are both producing like superstars, right? These guys are dominating the offense. This is a great offense and it's because of these two guys. You paid one, you got to pay the other. And it was a pretty easy argument to make for a gigantic contract. We'll compare the contracts in a second. Devonta Smith, a similar story, right? First year, 1.73. He gets a couple more years where he's hovering around 2. We're doing elite production. You got A.J. Brown. You got this guy. You just went to the Super Bowl. You got to keep everybody around. Even though they were coming off of 2023, which was a little bit of a frustrating year for the Eagles, a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover going on, there was still a very easy argument to make. You got to pay Devonta Smith, and it's only going to get more expensive, so do it now. Addison hasn't quite been to that level. His rookie year was 1.5, 2024 was 1.64, so he's still hovering, he's still in that, hey, you are a very good player and you're part of this offense, but we're not crossing into that elite barrier like those other two guys did. And then last year it dips to 1.36, dips under that 1.5 threshold, which is arbitrary. It's something I just made up as a rule of thumb, but like we're also like not blaming him too bad for that. Okay. Like that's, I of all of the things you could blame for the 2025 offense going belly up, I don't think Jordan Addison's like skill is very high on many lists. You probably are going to come up with a lot of other guys first. So I think, and the average of this, by the way, is at evenly 1.5. And I think that's probably a fair way to look at him. 1.5, maybe better, maybe a little better than 1.5, because the we'll call it the bad quarterback, hopefully fluke year is, dragging down the average a little bit. So even if we give him that credit, and I think we should give him some benefit of the doubt for that, that still doesn't live up to the Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith thing. And therefore, I don't know if he's going to get that contract. I don't know if that, if that negotiating leverage is there, especially with the off field and missing a couple games and where's the offense at and all that other stuff, right? I think you could see, and if I had to guess, if we get to a point and we're next off season or maybe right now and we go, wow, Addison is playing hardball, he's going to hold out or hold in, and is just going to, if we get to a contentious negotiation and if we're all staring at each other and playing hardball with stuff, I would guess that this is going to be where the tension is. Where Addison wants to get paid like those other elite wide receiver 2s, and the team is going to say, we don't see you as quite as good as Devonta Smith. And the team would probably be right to play hardball about that, and then they'll find a way to negotiate that. These things are always going to be a process that takes time. But I'm going to guess, like, if I'm Addison's camp, I'm coming to the table with Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle's contracts in hand and saying, give us this, and seeing what we can negotiate down from there. But that would be like my starting point. Because it's justifiable. It's way more than you would ever expect, but it's justifiable to start there and negotiate down. So if it's not those guys, well, what are we looking at? Well, that's why I wanted to look at the other kind of high, the mid-tier to low-end wide receiver ones, the guys that do dominate their offenses, but aren't in the world of Jefferson, Chase, these huge names, Puka Nacua, these guys that are going to go in the first rounds of your fantasy drafts. And so a couple of names that actually ended up sort of close to Addison over the 3 years leading up to their most recent extensions were Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton in terms of production. Judy's a very interesting case, but in terms of just yards per route run, over the 3 years leading to his contract extension, he actually averaged 1.89 yards per route run, which is better than any season Addison has had. He also has way more drops. And I know drops is something that there's probably going to be people in the comments screaming about drops because Addison dropped 7 passes, at least per PFF's charting. They're very forgiving about what they do and don't call a drop. So you might feel like there was more than 7, but he dropped 7. And 7's a bad number by PFF's standards. Jeudy in the last 2 years had 9 and 10. So it's worse. 19 over the last 2 years. And Addison's drops spiked a lot this year. And whenever you have those out of nowhere spikes, a lot of times they go back down. With Jeudy, it's been a very persistent problem. So that's different. But even with those drops, he's still outproducing by a decent enough amount. But I think we're in the ballpark where we can start to use that as sort of a framework. And Courtland Sutton is kind of in the same ballpark, 1.54, 1.66, 1.88. I would say Courtland Sutton and Jordan Addison, production-wise, can be expected to be at about the same level, at least by efficiency. The thing about Courtland Sutton, though, is he is the undisputed number one option on the Broncos. He is getting a ton he is getting like 120 targets a year. Addison will never sniff that with the Vikings because of Justin Jefferson. And so that's going to be the other hurdle about this is, okay, how do you deal with negotiating through, hey, if you did get 120 targets, you could be Courtland Sutton, but you never are. So why would we pay for you to be getting 120 targets? And what are we going to want there? That could be a sticking point in that negotiation that if things go sideways, I'm going to look at as the possible cause. But I don't think these things go sideways because I don't think the differences here are too crazy to squabble that much over. I think they'll take their time. They'll stare at each other for as long as it's profitable that they feel for them to stare at each other. And then eventually a deal will get done. That's at least my prediction as of maybe more than a year. But if he signed that deal right now, what would that look like? There's a couple other interesting cases that are maybe worth bringing up. Jameson Williams gets paid very much like a wide receiver one. He gets into the close to the Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle world. Not quite, but close to it, which he did not live up to last year. So that'll be an interesting situation to watch. There's DJ Moore, who got paid like a wide receiver one to play for Chicago. Didn't live up to that. It kind of did. And then last year, the production, at least by yards per route run, fell off quite a bit. So that's a different one. And then there's one name that jumps up a lot, and I think this is the one that Arif has brought up when we've talked about this on Locked On Vikings After Dark, which, by the way, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at 10 p.m. Central. You can find us live talking about whatever. Usually it is unproductive and silly. But the other name to think about is Jakobi Meyers. Jakobi Meyers is an interesting name because he's been quietly wide receiver one in a bunch of places. He was very much wide receiver one when he was with the Patriots. He wasn't supposed to be. That was they still thought it would be like N'Keal Harry or whatever. And then it turned out to be Jakobi Meyers. And he goes to Vegas and he was wide receiver 1A with Devontae Adams and wide receiver 1A with Brock Bowers in the 2 years he was in Vegas. He played very well, and he produced almost exactly the same as Jordan Addison. It was hovering around that 1.5 yards per route run, and it was just a matter of where the volume was because of Bowers or Devontae Adams. And then he goes to the Jaguars, and he does lead the Jaguars in targets because Brian Thomas Jr., I think very weird year in Jacksonville. I'm actually not going to speculate at all as to why that happened, but for the games that he was there, because he was only there for a partial season, for the games that he was there, he was getting 9-10 targets. That's wide receiver one production. So they were viewing him as this really big piece, and I think that they're kind of right to. Jakobi Meyers is a good player. So with the contract that he signed with Vegas, that might be another good sampling point here to see where the Vikings might end up. So let's look at those and see where we could possibly speculate a Jordan Addison extension to look like if it were made this offseason. And then if it does happen next offseason, we just have to change the salary cap we're comparing to. But we'll do all that next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everyone working toward the same goal. And it's true in sports just like it is in business. If you have a dynamic duo like Jefferson and Addison and you build your whole offense around that, letting Addison go is going to put a wrench in the gears for everything else. Great organizations win because operations matter. That's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Moving along with the Locked On Vikings podcast. So what could this contract extension look like? Looking at the three receivers that I brought up, which are Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, and Jakobi Meyers, who all signed similar deals that I think could look like the deal that Addison might sign someday. And the deals that they signed, if you want to just look at percentage of cap in the year signed, this is my favorite way to do this. If you look at between Jakobi Meyers, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Watson's around this world too, Courtland Sutton's a little bit higher, call it 7% of the cap. That's right between Jerry Jeudy and Jakobi Meyers, and Courtland Sutton is a little higher. He's at 8.2% of the cap. On the day that you sign, what your average per year is. So Jakobi Meyers' contract was 7.2% of the cap in 2025, and he signed the deal in 2025. It was a 3-year, $60 million contract, so 20 a year. And funny enough, Courtland Sutton also signs a contract, or he signs a 4-year contract, for $23 million a year. Now, again, he's a wide receiver one, but if you want to look at production, he's a little bit closer, at least in terms of efficiency, to Jordan Addison. And Jerry Jeudy falls to about a nice 6.9%, 3 years, $52.5 million. 17.5 a year. So we're looking at something like that. So if we were to extrapolate that to the 2026 cap and cap go up, it's probably going to look more like 365, which would be like $22 million a year. That would be a 3-year deal that you would get Jordan Addison on. And because it's just a 3-year deal, it might be the kind of thing that you want to get done right now before that price goes up with the cap going up. Because it'll be for the same 3 years. What you would do is you would have that, tack that on as an extension. So he would play out 2026, he would play out 2027 on the 5th-year option he's already got, and then you wouldn't add actual years and therefore add money until 28, 29, 30. So you'd have him wrapped up till 2030, and he'd be a Viking all the way through that. He'd be very happy with that, and the money just wouldn't kick in for a little while, which is how they typically will do these rookie deals. One very common myth about these extensions is if you're in a cap crunch in 2026, which the Vikings cut everybody, they have not been in a cap crunch for months. They've been in a roster crunch, but there's still this perception they don't have any money. What are they going to extend him with? It's future money. An extension, whether you have cap space or not, an extension will not kick in the major money the year that it is signed, basically ever. They just don't do that. They ramp up and they have these contracts backloaded, and the Vikings do it almost only that, and the rest of the league does it fairly commonly as well. It's very rare to see a contract that is 3 for $20 million, and it's a $20 million cap hit, and then a $20 million cap hit, and then another $20 million cap hit. It usually ramps up differently as a response to cap go up, as a way to try to at least mold it to the cap so you're getting at least a similar percentage of cap burden with each year. And then it will be a smaller cap burden each year than if you went 20 million now, which would be very hard, and then like let it ramp down over future years. Players don't tend to agree to the one that pays them less and less over future years. And so the negotiation tends to ramp up. So that would be about what it looks like. 3 for 65. And if you did that in 2027, it would still probably be a 3-year deal, but it would be 3 for like 70 or something. And you get a little more information. You get a little more certainty. You get to see how 2026 goes with Kyler Murray. You would get to see how he grows and how he, gets like builds chemistry with his quarterback, whether it's Murray or McCarthy. And you would obviously get to see a year more of data of can he stay out of trouble. So that's about what we're like probably looking for. And that's essentially his agent can go to other people and say, hey, this guy was wide receiver 2 in Minnesota, but I got him paid by, look at all these wide receiver 1s. Jerry Jeudy, who's been an undisputed wide receiver 1 in Cleveland, Cortland Sutton, who of course is 1, and Jacoby Meyer, who I don't think you can argue that he's not a wide receiver 1 unless you put him on a team with someone like Brian Thomas Jr. And you have to kind of say, well, he would be, but for this other guy who's a total superstar. And by the way, BTJ has a huge dip in his year in Jacksonville, so that might not even be true anymore. Again, I do not want to anger. I don't need to open that can of worms. Okay, I don't need to talk about Jacksonville. Nobody needs that. Best look away from that one. All right, it's like watching the video from The Ring. It's maybe cool to like satisfy your curiosity, but it's probably going to curse you and your family and your descendants to lifetimes of misfortune. So anyways, the contract will probably backload for a couple of years. So, again, cap space is not going to be a consideration for this thing. I mean, you'll have a signing bonus, and then whatever proration of that signing bonus will be part of it. And then you've got your Brian O'Neill deal too. That probably makes his cap hit this year go down. So these extensions will generate more cap space. I would guess that they'll be, if they do these 2 extensions before the season starts, it will help them to like sign their practice squad and have contingency money and all that, not hurt them. So I don't think you'd have to like do a corresponding move or a restructure or anything like that to make this thing happen. It's, I think, a fairly static situation. This kind of like high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 market is sort of melded together because the difference between a guy like Addison and a guy like Jerry Jeudy and a guy like Jacoby Myers is kind of just about who their teammates are, which feels pretty easy to dismiss in a negotiation and say, no, pay my guy for what my guy is worth, and here's what we think that is. From there, the decision just becomes, do we want to try to get it a little cheaper now, but a little riskier? Or do we want to get another year to be more sure that this is the kind of guy we want to have on our team through 2030 and then do it then, but then we're going to wait a little bit? And it might, again, be a totally moot point because if I'm Jordan Addison or Jordan Addison's agent, I don't really see a reason to give them the option to sign you to a contract that's cheaper that they view as risky. And then they might put like some kind of option nonsense in there, some kind of, personal conduct policy, void guarantees clause or something like that. Well, if I can have a 950-yard season and stay out of trouble, we're probably not having any of those conversations next summer. Then it's all ancient history. And you can just pay me for what I'm worth, and I probably make a little more money. If I'm Addison, that's what I'm doing. And I think there's at least some argument for the Vikings to agree to that. So maybe not now, and maybe not as much as we thought. But I think unless he gets in some kind of serious trouble that makes you want to really terminate that relationship, I think Addison's getting locked up. At least I hope so. I will talk to you all tomorrow. It's Town Hall Tuesday, so get your questions in. And as always, Skull.